Welcome! This is the Rustic Songbird Podcast, and I'm your host, Lydia Walker. This show is for you if you're ready to learn more about the craft of songwriting and take your skills to the next level. Thanks so much for listening. Let's get started. Hey there, welcome to the first inaugural podcast of the Rustic Songbird Podcast. This is our pilot episode, episode 1, featuring my good friend Erskin Anavitarte. And Erskin music is what we're going to talk about today. His process of writing, specifically songwriting, but his process in general of how he came to be a writer and what that looks like in his life. And I hope that this podcast and this interview will encourage you to start your writing, and if you're already started, to take your writing to the next level. So that is why we're here today. Erskin, welcome to the show.
Hello, world. Thank you so much, Lydia, for having me. And this is just a great honor for me to be a part of this first inaugural. There's kind of a lot of pressure when you're the first.
No pressure. This is a great start.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I've got a few questions for you, and I'd like to pick your brain about your story and have you share some of your story and your thought process with our writers that are listening. So first, let's just briefly share about your songwriting journey and how you got started writing songs. Tell us a little bit of your story.
Yeah, as Erskin Music brand has sort of gone out to different places, I found myself on university campuses and among high school students who will regularly ask me, how did you get started in songwriting? Like, how did this become a thing? Like, how did you even know that you would do this sort of thing or that you could do this thing? And there's several elements to that. In fact, last week I was in South Georgia, and I was sharing with a group of young kids, like 8, 9 years old, as they're looking forward to their careers and, policeman, fireman, lawyer, songwriter. That just kind of seems random. And I would definitely say that kind of intermingled in that story is the story of God's faithfulness and the tapestry of his grace, just sort of weaving together these passions that I have, one for music. I'm a reader, and so I've always liked words and the English language, and not just the use of fine words, but the fine use of words. And so all those things have just sort of come together in what I would believe to be the Lord's timing to present. One, there's an opportunity with the internet and all the things that are out there to be broadcast to other places very broadly, but then there's the opportunity with all the different media devices that we have today to be able to create things and to do those at a high level. And so it's just the perfect intersection, I believe, at this point in history where the Lord has put together passion for music, passion for writing, passion for song, and all those things together in a technological age which you're able to do those things to make this something that you can actually conceive in your mind, like the book Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. I don't know if you've never read that before. It's a wonderful read.
I'll have to add that one to my list.
Oh, it's a fantastic read. And he just basically talks about the fact that as artists, we now live in a world in which we can broadcast our ideas and our thoughts to millions of people literally in an instant. And because of that, there has created for itself a market in which if there's people who resonate with what it is that you're doing, you can become a part of that market or that group and really begin to make it a living on what it is you're doing and what is called the gig economy. But I won't bore you with all that. I'll just simply say that that is something that I discovered by the Lord leading me through various seasons of life and through various channels of life, was something that I was passionate about. And it went from the area of something that I can do to something that I enjoy doing to something that I must do. And that shift is just dramatic and radical and passionate and awe-inspiring.
That's awesome. I'm excited to see where else the Lord will take you with your music. It's definitely been inspiring to me, and I know it has already reached so many people just with a message of hope, and just the excitement in your music is contagious. So it's so cool to hear from different stories and how people got started, because there is so much opportunity now for anyone that's creative, for anyone who is musical or a writer, or even if you're not the one on stage, if you're the one maybe writing poems or writing songs or writing books that people will be reading, you have so many opportunities to share that with the world now that we have the internet, now that we have so much technology. And so I want to encourage people to just get started. with whatever they're doing. And that's kind of what we're doing here today is I am just getting started with this podcast that has been an idea for a while. I did a radio show for a couple years, and that was on the actual radio. And Erskin was on that show. I interviewed him a couple years ago. We go way back. So this is cool to have you as a part of this first podcast and talking to other creatives, other writers, and hopefully to inspire others who are kind of in the same boat. So I would love to hear some of your tips for how to gain confidence as a writer and putting your songs out there, because I see that as kind of a fear and a hesitancy with people that do write and write great things, but they have notebooks full of ideas that are just sitting on a shelf, or they have written them down, but they're like nervous to share them with anybody and put themselves out there. So how would you encourage someone to build up that confidence and be able to share their art with the world?
Yes. And so I think you probably need to take this for what it's worth, but there's 3 words that I think that should sort of govern this part of the process. And it is risk is right. Risk is right. If you're not willing to risk anything in terms of getting ideas out there that, in a social media, digital age can be combed through, then songwriting is not, it's going to be a private thing. You'll be a journaler. That's fine. But to take the risk to actually say, hey, I want to put this out there. And there's going to be some people, I don't know if you do this, but I do this all the time. I'll go to YouTube and I'll see videos that are up there, and it'll be the most magnificent video. And there'll be like 1 million thumbs up. And there's always like, 20 or 30 people who want to put the thumbs down. And I'm like, what could you possibly not have liked about that? But there's
right. How could you dislike that?
Yeah. How can you dislike that? Like, I have a moral problem with you disliking that quality, and is that, glorifying to the Lord, and, just kind of annoys me. But that's kind of the generation that we live in. Everybody's got, an opinion about what it is they want to hear and what they think you should do.
Everybody's got a preference, but it is amazing to me how other people rate quality, because it might not be the best video, it might not be the best audio, and it might not be the best songwriting, but somebody would get something out of it. Somebody may not care, but that's fine. I feel like it's just important to put it out there. And so to have the confidence to make that risk is really important. And some people just don't know where to start.
Sure. I'm happy to share the fact that I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I think that it's only appropriate that we take risks in our lives, because, Christ coming to this earth and dying on the cross for our sins and paying the penalty for our sins, there's great risk involved in that. I think as followers of Christ, he didn't do that so that we could just sit back and just have a nice, easy, sanguine life, but a life of risk and glorifying him in the process, and then letting him lead us to wherever it'll be. Like you were talking about, there are songs that people have written before that technically, when you listen to them, there's maybe some technical flaws that are in the song.
Right. It may not be perfect, but
yet there's millions of people who have been blessed by the sloppy wet kiss, or, God loves me. And it's just, I just marvel at the fact that ultimately the Lord is in control of who's going to hear it, how they're going to receive it, and what the impact of that's going to be. And, I've got a good friend who tells me, if you want to sing in front of thousands, if you want to influence 1,000, then you go meet with this 10, and then you go meet with that 10, and then you go meet with 20 over here. And just over time, if you're continuing to be faithful, you'll sing too, and you'll impact thousands of people. And I just think we have to have that long view of our lives and perspective.
Oh, I agree. That is awesome. And I think changing our mindset on numbers and what that looks like would be important in the process of building confidence, because if you do look at some great videos that are like produced well, or some songs that are really done well, and they have millions of views or followers or whatever, it's hard to get started when you have 0 views. But you know what? Everybody starts from the bottom. Everybody starts at 0. And if you do have something valuable to share with the world, and even if it reaches one person, I feel like it's worth it to put it out there.
Sure.
And so you have to think of one view as being important, because you never know if that's going to help one person make their day better, make their life better, or if that one person will maybe share it with all of their friends, and then it's going to go out to more people. So I wouldn't discredit a single view or a single comment or a single person that is interested in your songs or your music or your writing, because even that one person can make a difference.
Yeah. So and I'll use a couple of names here. There's a writer that I write with is from the Northeast. She's from New Jersey, and her name is Holly Silva, and she's currently a student at Liberty University. Her dad does a lot of promotions for me in the Northeast, and she's just got a tremendous feel for writing at a young age. And I think that there's a lot of people who view her works on the internet, and they've gained inspiration and confidence for her. And you know that in the age that we live in, with teen suicide on the rise and with a lot of bullying and cyberbullying, things like that, there's a lot of young people who are just looking for somebody who's their age, who just they can relate to, and words that will inspire them and encourage them. And so she may not get millions and millions of views from people in the music industry and all these different things, but her music has a particular reach in the generation that she's a part of that allows her to be able to be a voice of calm and reason and stability for people who are going through turbulent times. And that, like you were talking about, that is not to be discounted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is her name? Go ahead and share.
Holly Silva.
Holly Silva.
Holly Silva.
That would be someone to keep track of. That's exciting.
She's definitely on the rise, and we've written some things together, and she's got a tremendous spirit and really humble personality. And I think she's one of those people that I can see her singing on Broadway at some point in the future and doing a lot of tremendous things. She loves the Lord, and so it'll be interesting to see how that talent is geared toward serving Him.
That's awesome. And you brought up writing together, and that's another thing I think that builds up confidence, is just having community and having people around you that are like-minded and that are going to, be positive influences in your life. You're definitely a positive influence in my life, and you've been kind of a mentor and friend to me for a while. So,
well, to that note, for all your listeners that are out there, I've tried to get you to write a rap song with me. I've been denied several times.
We'll have to work on that. I'm open to it. So,
but in all jest, I just think that being able to write with you would be one of those tremendous honors in my own life. Now, as you're listening to this, don't think that's all on Lydia at all, because I travel so much that when I actually get back in town, it's important for me to spend time with my family. And I've got a list of about 15 deep of people that I've got to write with that I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get to this before October.
Yeah, and it'll happen eventually. It'll happen when the time is right. And I think just having those people that you can call on, and the people that, you'd be willing to put on a list and saying, hey, I'd like to write with that person. I think it's important to have that community and those friends that you can call on, work together, encourage each other, because it's not a Lone Ranger world out there. So I think finding that group, whether it's a Facebook group or whether it's, a podcast here, or whether it's an in-person meetup, finding that community is really going to make a difference.
Now, I'm going to tell a quick story here, and then maybe I'll go from interviewee to interviewer, but I don't know if I should mention this, but it's a true story, so I think the truth will set me free. I was at a writer's workshop one time with Jenny Lee Riddle, who a lot of you guys will probably know as the principal writer behind the song, the Revelation song. It's millions and millions of copies sold of that. And I asked her one time at a writer's retreat, will you write a song with me? And unfortunately, I did it in the wrong way, which I clearly acknowledge. And her response was kind, and yet it reminded me of the fact that there are writers who are at the upper echelon who have thousands of people who want to write with them. And now that I'm into this process and working on another album now, this will be my third album in Nashville, my sixth album overall, I'm realizing that the number of people that you meet along the way that you would like to write with increases, and it continues to increase. And yet your time begins to decrease, and especially having to refine things down. And so my turning the cap around for just a second is to say to you, what are some helpful groups that you think people could be a part of as they're listening to this and saying, hey, I want to get started. I'd like to write with Lydia. I'd like to write with Erskin. And yet I might end up, 10th on the roster and may not be able to write for a while. How do you navigate that? Where do you send people?
Yeah, we all have the same 24 hours in the day, and unfortunately, we can't multiply that. That's our limit, but we can make good choices and, spend time doing things that are important. And so I think being willing to put yourself out there and ask is important. I've asked some friends of mine and they just say, no, I don't have time right now. I'd love to, but maybe another time, and that's fine. It's definitely worth asking because you never know if somebody's saying, oh yeah, I've been wanting to co-write more. Let's do it. Let's put it on the calendar. And then that wouldn't have happened if you asked. So if you hadn't asked, that's the reason that I've started the Rustic Songbird Writing Community is to have a list, have a group on Facebook, have people that can share their writing and get feedback and get encouragement. I think my spiritual gift is encouragement. And so I've seen that is a big need in the writing community.
I would affirm that spiritual gift.
Thank you. And I think people just need the encouragement to get started, to keep going, to not give up. And that's something that comes really naturally to me. So I think that whatever it looks like, whether you look for local writing groups that meet in person, sometimes they'll meet at libraries or churches. There are, different ones citywide and statewide and different groups like that, or online groups, Facebook writing groups, or you can Google different things about writing and find people that are in your specific genre. If you write a certain kind of song, if you write poems, if you write devotionals, just look for those groups, maybe be a part of multiple groups that you can just pop in, see what other people are doing, get some feedback. I think that would make a big difference and would probably inspire you to try something new.
Sure. Just to stay on theme of what it is that you guys are doing with Rustic Songbird, I think it would be helpful to give people a little bit of the depth and breadth of how that songwriting process works. I think it's pretty important to have proper boundaries that are in place. And so I want to make sure that as I'm writing with women, sometimes I'll do a Skype write. Mm-hmm. So there's no indiscretions that are there. And then sometimes, obviously, when I'm writing with guys, and we can be in the room together. Or if there's multiple writers or a safe environment, I'll also write with women, and my wife's knowledge of that. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to also say that songwriting process for me usually takes about 2 or 3 hours. Usually not 2 hours, usually 3 or more hours if we're actually going to write a song, or at least that amount of time on multiple occasions. Mm-hmm. So it's not a quick process. And if people think, you just get together with somebody in 15 minutes, you bang out a song and then go on your merry way, it doesn't happen that way. There's usually a lot of discussion back and forth about where the direction of the song is. I know that I wrote last week with one of my co-writers, Addison Horner, who's down in Orlando, Florida. And we went back and forth just kind of trying for about an hour to get the tense of the song right. Is this first person? Is this present tense? Is this past tense? Is it past tense in this part of the song? And just those kind of things that you do when you're in a co-write makes that a long process. But I think by the time you finally lay the song down and say, this is what we want to say to the world, it's a very rewarding process.
Yes, I think sometimes it does take a longer time, but that's important because you do want to hash out, what are we trying to say here? Is this the best way to say it? And I think it's good to ask yourself questions, but if you are in a co-write situation, you can bounce ideas off each other and get instant feedback. So that's another thing I would encourage people to do, is to either write with somebody else or to share part of your writing before it's done and get some feedback, because sometimes we can have our blinders on and we think our first idea is just golden and it's the best. And then somebody else will say, what does that really even mean?
Yeah.
So then we have to go back to the drawing board. And some songs come super fast. Some songs take a while. Some songs are never finished, but that idea may lead to another idea that becomes a great song. So I don't think there are really any truly bad ideas, but to get to that great idea and to that great song takes some effort and some work, and usually a good solid chunk of time.
Yeah.
So in your thought process, in your writing, how do you come from a place of honesty to connect with other people? Because I think honesty is part of your story and your persona. So like when people see you and hear your music, they hear authenticity, they hear that you're genuine. So is there anything in your thought process of when you're writing that that you think, you know what, I'm just going to be raw and honest here because that's what's going to connect with people?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. I don't mean to name drop here, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'll just leave it very general. But I'm friends with a bunch of what would be well-known staff writers who write regularly for a variety of artists. And to me, I have a great deal of respect for that type of industry mindset that you can go and you can hone your craft to the point where day after day after day, you're becoming proficient at it. And it's kind of like the person who says, well, I don't write songs when I'm just inspired. I write songs until I'm inspired. And they're just able to, just like a sharp knife, be able to operate that way. But I think one of the dangers of that is that you lose a measure of authenticity when you're just creating to create so that you can pass it to somebody else. For me, as I examine that question, I'm thinking about the fact that as an independent artist, I'm having to write songs that when I get up on stage and perform that song for people, they're going to hear that song, look at me, listen to the song, look at me, and they're going to think, would he really be communicating those type of things through the words that he's using? And I just feel like that has to be authentic or you're just overlooked.
Yes, especially if you're the person that's going to be on stage and performing that song or presenting that writing, you do want it to be in words that you would actually say, like conversational. You may not say things in a poetic way when you're just talking to somebody, or you may, so it's important to let your true voice shine through your writing.
And I would just say a note to people who are out there, who are writers/artists. It's important because the people will connect with you. I was talking with somebody last week and they were asking me about, different big name artists. And I said, the difference is as an independent artist, what people will do is, it doesn't matter if you're not the biggest name artist. You're the person that's present in the place where they're at. And if they connect with you because of the authenticity by which you sing and the way that you relate to them, they'll buy your music and they'll invest in what it is that you're doing, even though you're not the biggest name that's out there, because you have made a connection with them. And I think that goes through the writing process, that goes through the performance process, and that hopefully will be a vehicle to being able to get a message that the world so desperately needs out to them at a time when they so desperately need it.
Man, and that human connection is so important. In a world that is getting more complicated, it seems, having those things that bring us together is so important because there are things that don't change.
Sure.
Like, love and peace and the things that we can have through Christ are not affected by our circumstances. And I believe that those internal things that don't change can really bring us together. And so I believe that every person has a voice and every person needs to share from their perspective and not worry about what people think, but just be willing to take that first step to get started, to put yourself out there. And then, like you said, it's just like a conversation, and it's just being honest about who you are, doing your thing, staying in your own lane. And you don't have to be like everybody else. You have to be you.
Sure.
So before we wrap up today, I'd love to hear any advice you have for someone who's just getting started, whether it's in songwriting or writing in general. But since your experience is a lot with songwriting, any musicians that are out there and listening who would want to write songs, what would you encourage them to do as they're just getting started?
Yes. And this was some advice that was given to me when I first moved to Nashville. I've been here now, it's 2018, so I've been in Nashville for about 5 years now. And one of the things that was told to me by a longtime Nashville industry person was that you have complete permission to create because there's no pressure on you. You're not signed to a label. You're not a part of a writing group that requires you to do certain things at a certain time in a certain way. And so you have permission to just go out and create. And so there's no genre restrictions on you. There's no, limitations to what it is that you could offer up. You can try ideas out, and you have a great deal more freedom when you're starting out than you do once you get down the road. And I've actually even experienced that myself. Now that I have a quote unquote brand, the more as an artist you go along and you say, well, this is who I am. I'm a Christian artist. I'm not, secular artist. As a Christian artist, I'm in the Christian, more contemporary side of things. Okay, now I'm that. Now, the more you begin to brand yourself and identify who you are, the more your limitations become. Now, all of a sudden, it would be inappropriate, first of all, but it would be just incorrect for me to come out with a country song just talking about, all the different themes that country music uses, because it's like, that's not my brand, that's not what I do, and I don't have permission to create that. So, just be creative as God has designed you, and if your love and your passion is for Christ, then that'll come out. It will come out. You can't keep that hidden.
Yeah, that's exciting to have a clean slate, to have a fresh start, and to just be able to start saying those things like, this is who I am, this is what I want to write. And then those limitations can actually help you later on if you are truly doing what you love and being who you are. Sure. Then it won't be a difficult thing. It will be kind of a natural thing that grows over time. So
yeah, it helps you focus.
Yeah, when you're just starting, that's the time to experiment and try different styles, or you might not know that you're good at something. So that's what I would encourage someone just getting started. And I appreciate your time with us today to share about your perspective and your process. And I would love to have you back on the podcast at another time to share any new music that's coming out. But in the meantime, I want to encourage everyone to check out your website, which is erskinmusic.com. And I will leave that in the show notes in the description as well. So check out Erskin Music. Check it out on Facebook, Instagram, all the social media. There will be links on the website as well. So erskinmusic.com. Thank you so much for sharing today and being part of my very first Rustic Songbird podcast.
That's a lot of pressure.
This has been great. I really appreciate your
I'll listen to the show, and then I'll learn some stuff. And then when I come back later, I can apply what it is that I've learned.
That sounds awesome. I would love for you to be a part of this community as well. For those listening, you can join the Rustic Songbird Writing Community with the link below in the description. So check that out and sign up to be part of our community. Get encouragement in your email inbox, in our Facebook group. Share your writings, get feedback, and be part of what is going on. Stay tuned for episode 2 of the Rustic Songbird Podcast. I'm your host, Lydia Walker, talking to my friend, Erskin Anavitarte. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a fellow writer. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you in the next episode.